We all know what happened, so let's not waste time going over the details. But just to set the stage, at around 1 a.m., emergency services were called to La Constellation in Crans, Montana. A fire had broken out in the basement. Today, I want to focus on what's coming out on that story as well as the numbers. I want to focus on the numbers because the numbers don't lie. 40 people dead, 119 seriously injured, over 100 people packed into a basement, no fire exit. But stay tuned for our deep dive because we finally have a name. Moretti, who escaped allegedly with her fistful of cash, plus the fact that the fire extinguishers were locked away. Now, what blows my mind is this was Switzerland, not some shady bar in Thailand. But first, I want to talk about the staircase. The only escape route was the staircase, a staircase that had been narrowed during renovation. Let that sink in. Who approved that? And here's another fact that you don't get to ignore any longer, Switzerland. There had been no safety inspection for 5 years. Five. Yeah, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. 5 years. Why? Why? And what does the mayor say? Oops. Stay tuned for the deep dive into the absolute BS. If I were one of the parents, I would be. Go ahead, comment and complete the sentence. Livid is just one option. Because according to new explanations, local explanations, there are only 5 inspectors for 10,000 buildings. Yes, we're still talking about Switzerland. 5 inspectors for 10,000 buildings. 5 seems to be the magic number here. So you tell me, who is responsible for this tragedy? Because right now, even in the comments, a lot of people are rushing to defend the Swiss municipality, the Swiss government, the system. They run things well. Switzerland is efficient. The rules are followed. 5 inspectors for 10,000 buildings? That's not an oversight. That's not unfortunate. That's not bad luck. That's what we say in English, a monumental F-up. Because we're talking about Switzerland here, in a country that prides itself on rules, on regulations, on precision. How difficult, honestly, would it have been to hire more inspectors? This isn't rocket science, this is basic safety. And yet, when asked to take responsibility, the councillors, they refuse to step down. Their excuse, I love the way they frame this. They don't want to jump ship. Jump ship? Come on, children who should be at school today are in a morgue. And if that's not a moment for you to step down, to admit this monumental F-up, and to make room for people who are willing to use simple freaking logic like hiring more inspectors, then when is the time to step down? It's not jumping ship. I did promise you a name, so let's dive into it. Moretti. She owns 3 bars in the area. She was in the bar at the time of the fire. She escaped with light burn injuries. Others didn't. They are basically DNA fragments right now. I'm going to show you the layout of the venue, and when you see it, you'll understand why so many people were trapped. The ones who survived didn't escape because the system worked. No, they escaped because they broke windows, because they had the foresight to pick up a chair and break a window. Now, that's not evacuation, that's desperation. Let's just call a spade a spade. And then we've got news coming out that the average age of the partygoers was 19. So let that land. Also, there are confirmed reports of victims aged 14 and 15. 14. I'm curious, what were you doing at 14? Playing on your PlayStation, riding your bike, going to school, doing your homework? I'll tell you what you probably weren't doing. You weren't hanging out in a bar with alcohol and adults at 1 a.m. in the morning. You weren't watching waitresses sitting on the shoulders of other staff members with bottles of champagne with sparklers lighting up the ceiling. So, again, what were these children doing there? Who decided that was acceptable? Did the parents know? Now, I mentioned the ceiling, so let's circle back to the ceiling. Let's talk about it. Acoustic material had been installed. So I'm going to guess that it had clearly passed inspection at some point, right? But here's what nobody seems eager or even willing to address. I mentioned the waitress climbed on the shoulders of a staff member's shoulders, holding champagne bottles and sparklers, waving them into the air like it was some kind of entertainment spectacle. So was that acoustic material flammable? Was it rated for this kind of environment? Did anyone even consider the risk? These are not nitpicking questions. These are life and death questions. You know, if this had happened in China, we would have said poor quality. Of course, you'd expect this in China. They don't really care about regulations. But we're talking about Switzerland here, and these questions haven't been answered. But there's one quote that really cuts through all this politeness. It's from Paolo Ponte Greppi. She's an 80-year-old Italian resident, and this is what she said. We need more safety in these places because it's not the only place like this. It's not the only place like this. Why didn't the town do the proper checks? For me, that's terrible. She's saying what many Swiss people don't want to hear. You can't hide behind the reputation of your country. You can't wrap failure in national pride. You can't just lay out flowers. You can't deny the numbers. 5 inspectors for 10,000 buildings. Meanwhile, today, families sit in churches, people are filling the pews, memorial masses are being held, and some children are not being identified by their faces, but by dental records and DNA fragments. Let that be the image that sticks in your mind. Not the candles, not the flowers, not the speeches, not the silence. DNA, dental records, children. This wasn't fate. This wasn't bad luck. This was allowed. Now we're going to dive into a reading that talks about what Moretti did when the fire broke out. Let's take a look at the news article from the Daily Mail. Basically, what it says is the manager of a Swiss bar, 40 years old, was seen fleeing the burning building with a till, which is a cash register full of cash, as the inferno took hold, as the building erupted into flames, killing 40. We're going to show you the photos of the 40 who were killed, and what's going to shock you is the ages of those kids. So the manager of the Swiss bar where 40 people died in a fire while ringing in the new year, celebrating the new year, was allegedly filmed fleeing, running away from the building with a till cash register full of cash as the blaze took hold. Jessica Moretti, 40 years old, is accused of ignoring the revelers, the partygoers, as flames consumed La Constellation in the ski resort of Crans Montana, and she made off. She ran off with the evening's takings. The takings, the money in the cash register, the takings for the evening, the amount of money that they had collected. And this is from Italy's La Repubblica. That's what the news outlet claims. And you know what? This is what I love about news reporting, objective news reporting, because in Switzerland, as you will see, they are kind of trying to let the story simply die, maybe even sweep some things under the rug. But the the Italian newspaper made this claim. Now she's already under investigation for manslaughter, as well as causing bodily harm to 119 others who suffered horrific burns. Yes, if you were trapped in a basement, 100 people with no exit, then of course you're going to suffer horrific burns. But hey, listen to this part. The bar manager, who is French, she sustained a burn to one of her arms as the inferno tore through the bar. And the French public newspaper is questioning whether she got this burn while she was retrieving the cash register. Oh, Moretti, the knives are out. People want answers. And dozens of people tried to escape the venue. They were pleading for first aid. And of course, we now know that the fire is believed to have been caused as staff waved champagne bottles plugged with sparklers close to the ceiling. And then there was the flashover, and the entire venue ignited in seconds. Her husband was not at the bar. And here we have Jessica Moretti and her husband. All right. And this is the moment, as you can see, when the ceiling caught fire. And we've also got some other vivid, disturbing images coming out of there. But also, what's interesting to note is that many partygoers continue to just film this instead of leaving, which really does raise the question of, really, is this what we have become as, you know, humanity? We just need to film everything. Everything is content. And now investigators are examining whether the soundproof material used on the ceiling of the bar conformed to safety standards. But this is the part that really got my attention and upset me to some extent, I'll be honest with you. Former staff have also claimed that safety standards at the club were poor, alleging that fire extinguishers were kept under lock and key, which means people didn't have access to them, and that the bar's emergency exit was often locked. And hey, they got away with it because, as you will see later in this article, there were no safety inspections in the last 5 years. The last one was in 2019. And in 10 years, there were only 3. So, of course, they got away with all these shenanigans. Yeah, locking the fire extinguishers away. The bar's emergency exit was often locked. So, the Morettis, both born on the island of Corsica, they bought the venue in 2015 and they did these renovations. And Mr. Moretti claimed that his bar followed all safety regulations. By the way, they own 3, so I'm hoping that the others get inspected like ASAP. And he did the renovations, but he acknowledges that his bar was only inspected 3 times in 10 years. In 10 years. And the municipality has put out the story that they only have, 5 inspectors for 10,000 buildings. And then we've got the funerals of the 6 Italian teenagers, and we're going to look at that in a moment. Let's just go back to the first one. Art student from Milan, 16, 15, 15 and 14. What were they even doing in the bar? They were identified through DNA testing because they are really fragments right now. 16, 18, 15. Kiara, 16. Okay, here we have an adult. 24. This was the amateur footballer, apparently quite a sensation. And he was studying at Dubai Swiss International School, Italian. 22. And then we've got the oldest victim, who's 39. He was working in a casino there, but then you've also got to look at this. You've got 14-year-old girls, you've got a 39-year-old man who had every right to be in that bar because he met the criteria. He was 39. But also, I don't know, this is deeply disturbing, deeply disturbing. Giovanni from Bologna, 16. This was the DJ, 23. Here we have another 14-year-old. 26, 16, 15, 17. And there were 40 people killed from 7 different countries, but 26 of them were aged between 14 and 18, and some were burnt beyond recognition, and they were only identified through DNA analysis. I just want to find the section about, right. So the mayor, it took him 5 days to speak at a press conference. Okay. He said that no periodic safety inspections had been carried out at this bar since 2019. And he says, we are profoundly sorry. Okay. Thank you for that. I'm sure the parents appreciate it. But we did not have an indication that the checks had not been done. What do you mean we did not have an indication? Isn't it your job to know whether safety checks are being carried out or not? Look, don't manipulate the language, don't twist the language. We did not have an indication. Why don't you just say we didn't do the checks? We didn't do the checks because that's what it comes down to. And then we regret that. Okay, wonderful. But he confirmed that he would not be resigning. The audacity, the gall. Telling reporters that he and his officials were elected by the people of Crans-Montana. Yes, but you were elected to do a job. You were elected to make sure that the town is safe, and you failed. The only possible thing you could do would be to resign because you failed. You had a job to do. You failed miserably. The stories coming out that there are only 5 inspectors for 10,000 buildings shows that you were not paying attention to what was going on. So we effed up, but we're not going to resign. Wow. Wow. And he also said that the soundproof foam used in the bar was considered acceptable at the time. Yes, because at the time was 10 years ago. You didn't really do any safety checks for 5 or is it 6 years now? So yeah, at the time, look at how he's using the language. But hey, there's great news, not for the kids who should have been at school today, but who are in a morgue somewhere. But there's good news because all these sparkler candles have now been banned inside venues. And the council, oh, they're looking at why this happened. And now they will ensure more checks are carried out. Yeah, this is kind of like locking the barn door after the animals have escaped. Yeah. I'd like to know your thoughts. Should these officials step down? I think they're just holding on to their cushy jobs because, let's face it, they were doing nothing. It's really, really simple. You only have 5 safety inspectors. You know that's not enough for 10,000 buildings. You hire more. But you didn't. You didn't. So you kind of have blood on your hands. You are responsible for this. You didn't do your job. But now you don't want to resign. I fully get that. Having a government job must be just so cushy, right? Do you think that they should resign? And also, all of this language that's being used, why do you wait 5 days? Why do you wait 5 days to give a press release or news report? Why 5 days? The number 5 just keeps coming up, doesn't it? 5 years, no inspection, 5 days before we give a news report or an interview. 5 safety inspectors for 10,000 buildings. It's physically impossible to do. I don't know. Tell me your thoughts in the comments below. And if there are any new updates, we will cover them. But at this point, I think the story has been looked at from all angles. If you enjoy the way we report on English Decoded, could you take a moment to show us your support? Could you like and subscribe? Maybe share with a friend. And I would really like to thank all of you for your comments and your support in our last video. I'm Nas, and all I can say is it makes me really, really sad that there were 40 lives interrupted, lives that didn't need to be lost. May they rest in peace, but that just seems like a very simple thing to say in the face of such a tragedy. Stay safe.